Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you might be. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. And today we're going to talk about solving the 5 pain points of private clouds. My name is Vamsi. I'll be your moderator today, as well as one of the co-presenters. And I work on the strategy team here at Platform 9, and we're excited to be hosting you all today. And before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. This webinar today is obviously going to be streamed live, but will also be available on demand. So you can essentially replay it. So feel free to share it with your friends and your coworkers and so on and so forth. And we'll also be sharing certain attachments and collateral and white papers on the topic. And obviously we can't get through a lot of the technical content as well as the deep dive content we want to cover given the time limitation here. But we're going to attach some blog posts and white papers and information on future webinars as well for you all to look over. And last couple of things before I turn over to Peter Frey is that feel free to ask any questions that you have at the Ask a Question at the chat window at Zoom, and we'll be answering questions at the end of the session. And if we don't get to your questions by the end of today's webinar, we'll be sure to follow up afterward. And again, please feel free to share the webinar in your social networks, on your Twitter, your Facebook, your LinkedIn. So without further ado, let me kick it off here. Pass it over to Peter for introductions. Peter.
Hey, everybody. My name is Peter Frey. I'm a field CTO here at Platform 9 Systems. I manage our pre-sales and post-sales groups at Platform 9. I engage with customers of all types, different enterprises across the country on a daily basis, talking to them about private cloud and their initiatives with, their private cloud and Kubernetes and OpenStack and all kinds of different things. And hailing to you today from Florida.
Thanks, Peter. And Vamsi here, Vamsi Kematiganti, Chief Strategist at Platform 9. And I've spent the better part of my 2-decade career at Red Hat, where I firsthand was involved in some of the exciting technology that they're shepherding in the open source and the other communities as well. And then at Hortonworks, and then I spent a few months as a CTO of a fintech in New York City. But again, primarily here working on strategy, customer implementation with Peter and his team, as well as finding out what problems are customers looking to solve and how can Platform 9 technology help solve the same across public clouds, private clouds, and edge clouds as well. So again, glad to be here. And I'll turn it over to Peter to talk about the poll and the gifts that we bear today. Peter.
Sounds good. So we are going to do a quick poll today. Kamesh, if you want to kick that off. Great. It's a 4-question poll, right? We'd appreciate if everybody would take, 30 seconds to a minute and read through the questions and answer them real quick. This will help us frame some of the conversation that we're going to present to in this webinar today. And while that poll is going, I will move forward one slide. Today we do have a prize, right? We are going to give away a Lego set to one lucky winner. You must be present at the end of the webinar to win this, but we will give it out live at that. And then somebody from Platform 9 will reach out to you and get, your contact information so we can ship you the Lego kit. Looks like it's a Saturn V Apollo spacecraft. Okay, Vamsi, looks like some of the answers are coming in. We'll give them another minute. What do you think, Vamsi?
Yep, absolutely, Peter. Let's do that. So for those of you who are probably listening to this on recording, the poll has 3 main questions. The first one being, what is a use case for your private cloud? And the answers are, range from, having more efficient operations for existing applications to agile service DevOps, or to basically build a shared container as a service or a platform as a service, or looking for cost reduction in moving workloads from public cloud to on-prem? That's the first question. The second around, how are you running your private cloud today? So the answers range from running a proprietary virtualization technology such as VMware to running more in something in the open source with KVM, OpenStack, or using a managed public cloud, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third is your biggest challenges in running current private clouds could be licensing costs, operational overhead, a lack of support or SLA, and complexity with existing diverse infrastructure. And maybe too many silos of private clouds as well. And the final question is, how do you plan to manage private clouds in the near future? So choice A being a fully managed service with robust SLA, or B being self-managed with open source or VMware solutions.
All right, Vamsi, should we, let's end the poll now and let's review the answers and let's.
Sounds good.
So real quick to review some of the answers is kind of some interesting stuff here. What is the use case for your private and public cloud? The number one answer with almost 50% of the respondents was moving workloads from public to on-prem. That's kind of a interesting thing. I think that's a lot of people are starting to realize the costs of the public clouds as compared to the local data centers, and they're financially looking at that, making decisions to move back. The second question, how are you running your private clouds today? The number one answer there was running your own OpenStack KVM based environment. So that's pretty cool, especially for Platform 9, because we have a fully managed offering that we'll talk a little bit about today as it relates to that. The third question, what are your biggest challenges with your current private cloud? High cost of licenses and management is the number one answer, with 62% of respondents saying that. So vendor software like VMware or whatever it's going to be. And then the last poll question, how do you plan to manage your private cloud going in the future? 62% said they're looking to do it all self-manage. So, okay. There we go. And let's move on. So, Vamsi, you want to kick off on the goals for today?
Sure. So today we're going to do a few things, a pretty busy agenda. And obviously we'll talk about the state of enterprise private clouds. We'll chime in with some Gartner reports and things we're seeing as more and more enterprises, as the poll showed in this representative group, that companies are trying to build private clouds and shift cost away from public cloud. But again, why are private clouds so hard to build while public clouds are so alluring, right? We'll talk about some of the things that the public clouds have put in place, things around the agility, the high degree of scale, ease of use, operational models, so on and so forth. And we'll talk about, we'll zero in on 5 key pain points that we see customers struggle with. And some of these you have highlighted in the answers to the poll questions. And these range from things like, silos of infrastructure to high cost yet inefficient virtualization. And then, managing open source, which is a bit of a challenge, right? From a distribution standpoint, as well as from a day 2 operation standpoint. And then we'll talk about the Platform 9 approach to open source private clouds and why that's extremely compelling. And of the customers we work with, are we currently, for lack of a better term, own, or, we drive their infrastructure. There's some pretty big Fortune 100 names. So which talks to the fact that the Platform 9 architectural approach using the SaaS managed control plane is so useful and so topical in this day and age. And then we'll get into some of the architectural elements of that as well. And then we'll spare like 5 minutes at the end for questions. So if you look at the current state of enterprise private clouds, I think one of the questions in the poll today was the fact that the mix of why would an enterprise want to build out a private cloud when the public cloud seems to be slowly on the march in enterprise IT. So this is actually a snippet from a Gartner study. On the left, you have this notion of where public clouds are at this point. And obviously till 2025, 6 more years from then, now 5 more years, the public cloud is going to be a factor, right? Public cloud is going to increase its share of the pie by about 20%. But you also have this mix where on-premise infrastructure is going to move to a combination of a private cloud, which is on-premise, and an edge cloud. And the fact is that more and more workloads are moving to a more agile private cloud, but also moving to the edge, closer to your customers, right? So we at Platform 9 view the edge just as another private cloud, and that confers some key advantages to our customers. But the idea is that there's a shift right now that's happening in terms of the hybrid cloud becoming more private and edge-based with some public cloud. But we do have customers that complain about public cloud costs. We have firms we work with that are overshooting their operational budgets in the public cloud in a matter of months, and having to go off and buy more and more expensive public cloud technology, right? So again, at the same time, industry stats show that most private cloud deployments take far longer, they cost much more than budgeted, and ultimately fail to scale to expectations. So Peter, go to the next slide. We'll talk about why managing private clouds is extremely challenging, right? And number one, the fact remains that some workloads cannot just be moved to the public cloud, either because they serve an existing stakeholder group, or owing to the fact that there is the risk of long-term lock-in in the public cloud that an organization is already experiencing. So they wanted to kind of take that wait and watch approach to driving to more and more of the public cloud. At the same time, you do have the disparate infrastructure challenge. You've got multiple locations, multiple geos, multiple data centers, but you also do have the challenge of adding new ones over time, and you don't want to keep incurring that complexity that you're seeing there day in and day out. At the same time, legacy virtualization, though, is insufficient. It's brittle. It does not lend itself to software-defined infrastructure. So it lacks infrastructure as a service, agility features. It's not a PaaS, so to speak. And then DevOps becomes a problem using legacy virtualization, because every time you provision workloads, there's this complex set of steps you need to go through. And the whole term 45 days to a VM is not unheard of this day and age. We do have a lot of FIs we work with, financial companies, that you'd think would be very agile from an infrastructure standpoint, that are kind of having that issue. At the same time, open source is not easy to use, right? Open source, with OpenStack, the challenge has been twofold. The first is it's complex. It keeps evolving at a very rapid rate. When you look at technologies such as OpenStack and Kubernetes, they go from having 2 releases a year to multiple point releases a year. So how do you, as a customer, base your applications on a stable, feature-rich and mature release version, yet manage the day 2 operations? So which brings me to the next point, which is that with open source, day 2 is a well-known challenge. It is not uncommon for customers to be budgeting 1/3 of project costs on professional services resources, or high-end resources that know how to manage things like OpenStack, Kubernetes, and all of that to do things that have no value addition to the underlying application itself. So most of the day 2 work in terms of upgrading, monitoring, deploying, troubleshooting, all of these issues are tied not to the app, but to just heavy lifting that you've got to do anyways. And then finally, the cloud talent scarcity problem. In several geos in the US, to get a resource of the fully burdened cost of a resource that understands and knows things like Kubernetes or OpenStack can easily cost up to $200,000 or above, which is just a massive risk in terms of the staffing. So with that in mind, let's move and crystallize this to 5 key pain points. But prior to that, Peter, anything to add here on the list of things you've seen in your work with customers?
Yeah, I just wanted to expand on the extremely challenging part and dig into a little bit of what cloud operations teams are actually facing from a technical perspective a little bit. So, what I'm thinking about is if you're running a private cloud, your goal really is to have that cloud-like experience in your private data center. And to enable that, there are lots of different technologies that you need to use, right? So, you have your infrastructure layer, you have your storage layer, you have, your OS that you have to manage. On top of that, then you're starting to look at managing, an OpenStack environment, which has its own complexities, right? And then if you're moving into the Kubernetes space, it's not just Kubernetes, but it's the whole ecosystem around it. How do I manage Kubernetes? How do I monitor Kubernetes and all of that? So it's not just a few people that really need to get involved when they're starting to manage this private cloud, but it's a very, very large team. And I think that's where a lot of our enterprises that we're talking to today are having challenges, right? It's the people, it's the vastness of experience that's required, and developing it in-house takes a very long time, and it's fraught with challenge as well. So I think that's one of the key areas that we're having trouble with. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Momsy.
No, and that's a perfect segue in our next slide, Peter. And here we talk about the key reasons why private cloud deployments fail. And just at the outset, right, one thing to comment on this is that private clouds are a complex endeavor, like pretty much everything in enterprise technology. So it's a complex balance of people, culture, organization, and the various processes that have been put in place. But again, from a core technical standpoint, as Peter and I and our teams work with many leading Fortune 100, Fortune 500 enterprises, a few themes come to bear, no matter how big or small the implementation or the shop is, right, from an IT perspective. The first and foremost, disparate infrastructure. So there is a complex set of enterprise investments that have been made by companies. This could include different kinds of server infrastructure. This could include multiple data centers across different locations, different data centers with different security rules and principles that have got to be followed based on the local regulation. Things like a vast degree of heterogeneity in terms of servers, storage, networking, and also the fact that there are islands of infrastructure that are complex and constantly being added, right? So again, there's that legacy challenge, which is based on the whole issue of having multiple investments over time. And that leads us into the second point, legacy virtualization, right? So most companies have used VMware to kind of build out their private cloud. So again, good products, but over time, the mindset is that these products are always installed on-prem and managed on-prem. So this has led to an ecosystem of tools around monitoring, networking, and operations. And again, automation tools as well. So one of the things we've seen is that when you're trying to create a true IaaS or a PaaS experience for cloud native applications, this can be a big problem right now, in that the VM world basically is super expensive. At the same time, there are other additional costs that are added in terms of integration and testing to design the right solution for your environment. Peter, anything to add on the first 2 points?
No, I'll jump in right when you're finished the next two, and I got a nice little summary for that.
Got it. Okay. So the third point around is open source complexity, right? We spoke about the fact that open source technologies are not really at a point of being commodified yet in the private cloud space. So when you talk about technologies such as OpenStack, that's a project that's famous for its complexity, and the fact that many early adopters of OpenStack just gave up on OpenStack because it wasn't really designed to run at scale in day two. And it's a collection of projects, not enterprise products. And customers are always having to work with a vendor who would have a lot of trouble even putting together a really focused and a white box kind of delivery model. So we at Platform 9 have 50% of our customers that are running on our Platform 9 managed OpenStack. And it's an extremely seamless model in terms of how we've designed the tech, as well as how we make it extremely easy for customers to consume, and we get them up and running in a matter of hours on OpenStack in a production setting. So the point is, the open source complexity is there, and with Kubernetes, that is rapidly finding second wind, right? When you look at Kubernetes and the fact that There's so many concepts to get your arms around to. The framework gives you a lot of things that you'd have to otherwise build into your own application. Things like HA, things like seamless scalability, things like pod migrations based on traffic characteristics. But all of those come with a certain complexity cost at the infrastructure. The framework handles a lot of that complexity. And we run into customers that have a lot of Kubernetes, holy cow clusters, right? That are not to be touched, not to be upgraded because they break pretty easily. So part of this also is a lack of cloud skills. When you want high caliber skills of people that can create, CI/CD pipelines for developers to use, I mean, your private cloud is only as good as, as good as your developers find it, right? So where's the automation in terms of, tying up to a CI/CD pipeline, tying up to tools such as the, Docker registries, your artifactories, so on and so forth. So you need that DevOps skill set, SRE skill set. And because of the fact that you don't have this, we'll talk about why the hyperscale companies are dominating global business now in the global markets. But a key factor is that they've made it extremely appealing for their developers and for enterprise developers to use, hence the growth in the IaaS space in the public cloud. And the final point here is the fifth is the inefficient operations processes. The most basic thing here to talk about in terms of how efficient your private cloud is what's your VM or your server to admin ratio. If it's low, and you know that you're basically having more heads of people, manually operating your clusters, right? So across your compute, network, and storage, you want to find out what that ratio looks like, and how do you put in more automation so that you start to look more like a public cloud feel, and you're able to cut not just licensing costs or public cloud usage costs, but also the people costs with hand rolling your private data center out, your private cloud out. Peter, pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So when I think about this, the goal is to get that public cloud-like feel in your private data center, right? And, in order to, with that as your goal, and then you start looking at the complexity of your infrastructure, your silos between network and storage and servers, right? And then you look at legacy tools like a VMware, and you start having, thoughts about going into an open source and maybe doing something with OpenStack or Kubernetes, right? And having that lack of skills, all of this combines together to lead to that inefficient operations and processes, right? And I think that's why I think a large portion of private cloud initiatives are going to fail, right? Because not only do you have all these things and try to achieve that AWS-like feel in your local data center, you've got to have a web front end, you've got to have an API, everything's got to be fully automated, right? And getting there is really, really hard, and it takes some extremely talented people. So, that brings up the lack of cloud skills. And, I think most organizations, that's where their biggest challenges is, all of this combining together and, 2 years down the path, and they still don't have, they might have a nice infrastructure as a service, but they may not have complete operations around that and management and day two and everything that is involved there. So I think that's where the challenges are. Vamsi?
Thanks, Peter. So to that point, why do private clouds fail, but public clouds work, right? Three major points here in terms of what are public clouds bringing to bear that private clouds are not, right? The first point is the automation itself, right? Public cloud vendors don't roll out different regions, different services using, by hand or by scripts. Pretty much there's a lot of internal IP that's built in that enables them to provision, monitor, troubleshoot, and upgrade their services, right? And by services, I mean everything ranging from once the hardware is being set up. So if they have, tens of thousands of bare metal servers, as we see bare metal becoming more and more of a attractive proposition in telco and financial services, they want to be able to do the complete life cycle of management of bare metal using APIs, right? Things like Ironic in the OpenStack world. But that also spans your applications. Where enterprises do want to go and where public clouds have gone, even beginning with Amazon CloudFormation, as of even 5 or 6 years ago, was the fact that you could describe an n-tier application to your control plane in the public cloud, to your public cloud portal, and basically specify the number of servers you need at classical 3-tier app, number of servers at the web tier, at the app tier, the database, what kind of networking services you need, networking policies. You could put all that in a script and then provide it to the network, to the public cloud, and the cloud would go build that in a matter of minutes. And then if anything failed, they'd do a rollback so that you have an ability to kind of, by state, categorize your application and store that in something like a Git, roll back and roll forward. And that has been what is lacking in the private clouds, right? If you look at the enterprise private cloud, there's some combination of people, some combination of open source tools like Terraform and some Ansible, a lot of scripting, a lot of ad hoc stuff, and working with multiple vendor APIs. All of those kind of prohibit that high degree of automation, which leads to cutting down or really cutting down the number of admins and the time to market in provisioning your instances, right? It's not just about provisioning a VM in the private cloud, it is about provisioning an n-tier application stack. And that's something we really focus on heavily at Platform 9. The second point talks to the scale problem, which is if you want a multi-tenant, a true multi-tenant cloud control plane, this has been built by the public clouds, right? That's their internal IP, the management plane. And they basically have done this by hiring a lot of the original engineers at shops such as VMware, Google, Facebook. But the problem for the private data center is that that's not your business, right? You're basically building clouds in support of your business workloads, and you can't make it an IT project, a pure IT project. So this isn't something that your average private enterprise, Fortune 10,000 enterprise can afford. And there is a talent bar here. But the third point is that the velocity itself, right? Every year, public clouds are getting better in how they do operational reliability and adding new features. And the problem you're going to have in the private cloud is that you're not going to be able to evolve neither your stacks nor your scripts to the point of reaching that kind of agility, right? But again, the point is, at this state of time in 2020, you have to make a change in your operating model as a private cloud to be able to handle the complexity and scale of the transformation we're seeing here. And the fact is that even Gartner basically proposes and predicts that by 2022, most private cloud infrastructure initiatives that want to build these kinds of capabilities are all going to fail. And most of these projects are going to be abandoned, right? But the point is, this calls for a new architectural paradigm, a new type of architecture, which is based on open source, but can provide you with that public cloud look and feel and self-service and agility, but on your private infrastructure or your edge infrastructure. Peter, anything to add to this?
Yeah, so the closed loop automation I think is big, right? The public clouds do this really, really well. When they rack and stack some hardware, then they're done with it. They get a guy to rack it, they plug it in, plug the red cable into the red port, and turn the server on. From that point on, everything else is automated, right? They deploy the OS, they bootstrap it with their necessary tooling to be able to deploy a hypervisor on there, or OpenStack, or whatever tool they're using at that layer. And so adding infrastructure, adding components into a private cloud becomes a challenge because, I think as Vamsi mentioned, there are multiple APIs, multiple different vendors you're dealing with, right? One of our customers has taken this sort of to the nth degree. They've actually built a Jenkins pipeline that deploys the network, configures all the networking devices within a location. Once that's done, it uses Platform 9's Ironic offering to deploy the OS on there. From there, it bootstraps into either a Kubernetes cluster, and then that bootstraps to automatically deploying their apps into that location. or they bootstrap it into a OpenStack node where they can run virtualization, and then we can automatically deploy VMs into that environment. So I think it's really key to be able to go end to end. I also think it's really important to have that self-service kind of interface to be able to allow developers and end users to do these kind of things themselves, right? Putting some guide rails around it. But I think that's really important, is the closed loop automation. The next sort of thing is platform engineering. Even if it's not cloud scale, enterprise scale still can be quite large, and it can be a challenge for many organizations, right? And we talked about the network team and the server team and the storage team, right? But now putting it all together, it's a whole nother team that you're looking at hiring, right? The platform engineering team. That's the guys that are building the platform that will leverage all the closed loop automation I just talked about, right? And so getting from hey, I'm just pushing hardware out, to having a platform to actually delivering it to our end users is often a 3 to 5 year kind of endeavor. So to the platform 9 approach here. So I'll jump in. Bob, I'll let you do this one.
Yep. So what does the approach look like from a high level and from an aspirational perspective, right? Number one, and these are all commitments and promises that we're making to the market and we've kept up with our customers. Number one, you can integrate your existing infrastructure, right? If you're using VMware or bare metal, you absolutely can bring it into the architecture, into the management plane that we're going to talk about today. And there's no expectation that you'd replace what you have currently running. And obviously that goes for your existing, x86 infrastructure, your investment in storage and networking, so on and so forth. The second is that you can deploy any type of workload, be they VMs, containers, or bare metal, and bring them into the cloud. And then there's complete freedom from vendor lock-in, because we leverage open source Upstream, and we contribute to Upstream open source. So all of the architecture model that's made possible by our management plane, you have no fear. The platform 9 is taking you down a fork or a wrapper or a redistribution of an open source project. And then you can deploy it to any location, right? The workload does not have to be running on-prem. You could deploy it to the cloud, or you could deploy it to the edge if that's what you desire, and manage it as one logical entity. And then you have the operational complexity that we spoke about, that is going to be removed as well. So again, Peter's going to talk about how we enable these 5 key freedoms from an architecture standpoint. Peter?
Thanks, Vamsi. Right. So first of all, one of the Platform 9's biggest value propositions, right, is fully automated day 2 operations. So we can leverage our Ironic offering with OpenStack to deploy bare metal in any location across the LAN or whatever. We can then leverage Platform 9's OpenStack offering to deploy a virtualization environment, or we can use Platform 9's Kubernetes offering to deploy and manage Kubernetes clusters, right? And we do all of these things, and we guarantee a 99.9 uptime SLA, right? And that's a financially backed SLA. So, if you have hypervisors that go down or Kubernetes clusters that fail, right? Platform 9 is going to get on the phone with you. We are going to get on a Zoom call. We'll get our technical support team available, and we will troubleshoot it till the problem is resolved, right? We monitor everything that we deploy, so we can guarantee that we can make our SLA, right? So if it's a Kubernetes cluster, we take, we require an OS on there, but from there we deploy kubelet and the Kubernetes API server and the master nodes, the worker nodes, and all the certs, and configure everything for you, so it becomes a very easy process to deploy it, right? But we also monitor that. So if any of those components start failing, we're starting to get Kubernetes metrics about your Kubernetes cluster, and we'll alert you through Slack or email or whatever it is, to let you know when there's problems with that specific kind of element in Kubernetes. In addition, we also do that for OpenStack, right? So we do the same thing there. We can bootstrap it into the OS and then install OpenStack and all the components within OpenStack to have a fully functioning, KVM hypervisor environment, with Neutron networking and our Clarity UI, which is similar to the Horizon user interface. And that'll allow you, we monitor that as well. So anything that we deploy on the software, we manage for availability. We get alerts and alarms, right? We've got automated diagnostics on a lot of these things. So if a disk gets full and it happens to be logging or something like that in a particular directory, we can archive the logs or delete them, right? We have zero-touch upgrades for both OpenStack and Kubernetes. You can simply click a button and say, hey, I'm ready to upgrade my Kubernetes cluster. You select the cluster, and then we work through the process of what that means. And then everything is open source, right? It's straight from the GitHub repos. I think we're on OpenStack Rocky now and 1.16 of Kubernetes, right? So it's straight from the respective GitHub repos. We don't modify it, allowing you to be able to leverage a pure open source environment. Okay, so think of Platform 9 as an extension of your IT staffs. When we deploy an environment with you, we manage that environment. When there's trouble, we get on the phone and help you troubleshoot it. We're the people that you call when there's problems happening in your environment. So that helps you eliminate the operational complexity of managing a private cloud environment. Okay, upstream and open source, I talked to this a little bit, right? But the tools that we deploy, Kubernetes, OpenStack, Prometheus, Istio, all pure play OpenStack or open source tools, right? It helps you avoid any lock-in to any given vendor. And when we deploy something like a Kubernetes cluster, we can deploy it not only in your private data center, but we can also deploy it in a cloud. This allows you to have the same experience, whether you're deploying an app in private data center, private cloud, or an app in your hybrid cloud up in an AWS environment, right? Right, and then the integration between these tools is, we do a lot of the work for you, eliminating the need for you to have to do that kind of stuff. Okay, we touched on this a little bit as well, right? But it's kind of an old screenshot, but Platform 9 allows you to manage Kubernetes clusters. You can see a dev cluster there is selected, and we had clicked a button called upgrade because it notified us that there was an upgrade available. And we'll take that Kubernetes cluster probably running on 1.12 and upgrade it to Kubernetes version 1.13. The key thing here is that, we upgrade those Kubernetes clusters in place, right? We upgrade master nodes first, then we do worker nodes. We start with an individual master node. We coordinate and evacuate running processes on there if you allowed workloads to run on the master node. Then we upgrade that individual master node, and then we do the next one. And then we cycle through all the master nodes. Once those are upgraded, then we do work through the worker nodes, et cetera. And Kubernetes is moving pods around to make sure that the pods stay up and available as needed. And this is all done automatically for you. Platform 9 goes to great lengths of testing to ensure that, if you're running Kubernetes 1.13, what version of Docker do you need, right? How do you back up etcd? We test all of these kinds of things and ensure that all the appropriate things are available and work together so that when we go live with a production environment, we can meet our SLA. Bob, did you want to touch on anything here?
Oh, sorry, it was on mute. No, so Peter, just to add to that, the things we're talking about here in these few slides are product capabilities, right? In terms of how we make it easy to run private clouds at an extremely high ratio of VMs or bare metal servers or pods to admins. And a lot of the capability is made possible by having, number one, centralized management. So when we work with customers in telco, we see the situation where for every edge location they're running, which could be a POP, which could be a mini data center, or which could be a tower, a cell site, they're running one control plane, right? And it's a very common story in retail as well, where every store is running a single control plane. And what that means is that becomes a issue in terms of how you upgrade, how you manage, and just the people requirement to run these and to monitor them. With Platform 9's architecture, which we'll talk about in a couple of slides, it's one management plane that provides all of this magic. And that single management plane, which is Platform 9 technology coupled with things in the open source world that we have adapted, we've basically built an ability to run one central control plane and run multiple what we call DUs, or deployment units or regions, corresponding to one availability zone, right? So you could basically run n number of AZs, carve up your cloud as a number of AZs, and then run those regions in each of those. And that definition is a logical definition. So you could do so based on the different teams in the organization, or different data centers you're running, or different geographies, or you could take one data center and slice it up into different regions. But the advantage you have is that you're able to upgrade each of the regions separately if you wish, and keep those upgrades non-disruptive, right? So all of this magic is made possible using Platform 9 managed OpenStack. And one of the other capabilities that we've added to it, as opposed to other OpenStack distros, is an ability to manage VMware. So if you've got vSphere Enterprise in your environment, and you want that to be a platform that's managed by your environment, so you're not adding another silo or replacing one silo with another, you're able to do that using Platform 9. So again, of the majority of customers we work with, they all leverage that. And yeah, Peter, I think this slide probably brings home a lot of that message. You want to talk about it? Talk about the architecture?
Thanks, Vamsi. Yeah, so this is kind of the 90,000 foot architecture view of Platform 9. The top box is a Platform 9 management plane. We dedicate one of those to each one of our customers. They don't share any components out right down to the networking level. Users can log into a user interface and or leverage our API, right? And that allows you to do the deployment, monitoring, diagnostics, and versioning of OpenStack and Kubernetes in various different environments, right? So in your customer location, so the kind of the bottom two boxes here, we can work with and manage a VMware environment. So you have a single interface to manage everything. We can take bare metal nodes and manage those, right? And we can also manage a Docker environment within Kubernetes clusters. So we can deploy Kubernetes clusters in your bare metal nodes. We can deploy virtualization, OpenStack in your bare metal nodes. We can manage your VMware environment, and we can do all the same things with the same user interface, the same API, to creating EC2 instances or VMs in Azure or in Google. So we have complete access to be able to manage your complete estate of your environments. We do this by deploying a Platform 9 agent into the OS level for your private data center. And that reports back to Platform 9 on outbound port 443. That agent is simply there to allow us to have access to the machine, not access, but to control that machine to the extent of we want to deploy Kubernetes or we want to deploy OpenStack. And you do that by leveraging our API. It communicates outbound on 443, and then we can customize Kubernetes or OpenStack in all of these different environments inside of your private cloud. Okay. One of the other things that we do is we do everything centrally managed, right? You might have multiple Platform 9 regions that you hit. One might be your central environment. You might have data centers around the world, around the globe. You might also have POPs. You might have edge locations. We're showing some cell towers here for points of presence where we can deploy Kubernetes and OpenStack into those environments. We do it all through a centralized management model, allowing your operations staff to manage these environments centrally, right? So no more sending highly expensive resources with windshield time to travel to various different locations to manage these things. Once the box is booted and once it's plugged in with an Ethernet cable, we can manage the box from there. We can deploy the OS, we can deploy OpenStack, we can set it up for virtualization, and we do it wherever you're running your business. Vamsi, you want to touch on that before I wrap this next set?
No, so just the fact that any place which has a couple servers running could be a data center, right? And that has applications across different industries. For those of you in the retail space, you're going to have servers that are running in your distribution centers in your stores, or in the telco, different points of presence. Could be a cell site, could be a CDN at the CDN edge, or could be a gateway device, whatever have you. we could take those and using our agent-based architecture, very quickly turn that into a cloud or part of the private cloud. And then for those of you with more conventional use cases, where the majority of your use cases are going to be running in your data centers, this is, that's our core market, right? We could take n number of data centers and turn them into one true private cloud, and the UI and the API are basically going to be very public cloud-like. So you have the self-service for developers. You have different views based on the user you have. So centralized management isn't just inventory, but so the full range of CRUD operations on your clusters. You create clusters. You can obviously update them, delete them, read them, so on and so forth. And we do provide a good degree of capacity, measures into how the clusters themselves are performing.
Okay, thanks, Vamsi. So, if you wanted to think about what Platform 9 does, we're a managed service that delivers to you a production-ready private cloud, right? We can deploy virtualization, we can deploy Kubernetes, we can manage it all from one user interface. We're delivering to you Upstream, Kubernetes, and OpenStack offered as a SaaS managed service. We've already built the monitoring right into all of our products, so that helps you eliminate the need to build your own custom monitoring, right? And then you've got somebody to call with Platform 9. Our operations team, we've got your back, right? That's what they're there for. They're here to help you manage your private cloud, right? And when things are going wrong, they're there to help you resolve those problems. We've built all the automation from the ground up. So from the bare OS all the way through deployment of the OS, management of the OS, monitoring and maintenance of OpenStack and Kubernetes, all 100% automated. In fact, I'd probably say we've probably got the simplest zero-touch Kubernetes upgrades in the industry, and OpenStack as well. In fact, you select a Kubernetes cluster, you click it, and it upgrades for you. And we make sure that goes well for you. In addition, as OpenStack moves from Rocky to Stein and beyond, right, to Train, right, Platform 9 will be keeping pace with the OpenStack project. And then we also take care of managing and upgrading your OpenStack environment. We work with your teams to schedule a time that's appropriate for upgrading it. It helps you keep current, right? So when you come up with questions like, hey, I want to enable GPU support on my hypervisors for OpenStack, we say, okay, well, you need to upgrade to Stein, and then we'll give you that support built to do it. So we keep up with the project there for you. We're fully integrated. We're going to run where you're doing business. If it's AWS, Google, or one of the cloud providers, we can support those environments. We can also support your complete private cloud from the ground up. Everything is backed with a financially backed SLA. It's monitored 24/7, 365, right? And we're again remote managed. We're part of things like the Kubernetes Security SIG, Special Interest Group, where we get access to vulnerabilities to Kubernetes API and the Kubernetes project before they're kind of announced to the general public. And then what we do there is we work with the community or work with our individual engineering teams to put together a patch. So on day zero, either in OpenStack or in the Kubernetes world, we're able to have a patch, and that'll be out and available to you and your customers immediately. And we're in the very final throes of our PCI compliance, right? So we'll have a PCI compliance for our certified Kubernetes offering here. We've been working on that for just about a year now, and it's coming to a close anytime. Okay, Vamsi?
Yep, thanks, Peter. So just to sum up before we go to the questions, I think there's at least 4 different questions that the audience has put out there. Again, just to sum up, if you look at all the common points of failure in private cloud implementations, as shown on the left side, things like complexity of integrating disparate environments. With Platform 9, you have the ability to combine them into one logical private cloud, and view them as different regions in the across different areas. such as, public clouds, hypervisor infrastructure, co-located, so on and so forth, right? As long as it runs the Platform 9 agent, we can discover it and bring it into the cloud. The second is obviously the innovation, right? The fact that you're able to harness innovation that's being done in the open source space with both Kubernetes and OpenStack, and being able to provide that public cloud-like look and feel while using open source, while avoiding lock-in, and while reducing the virtualization tax, if you will. And the third is automating all the day two stuff. So you don't have to additionally, as you scale your cloud, hire more people or have more engineers working on complex clusters. Again, in and of itself, cluster lifecycle management, cloud lifecycle management has no business value, right? It's the application on top of that. So we focus on the underlying stuff, so you don't have to, and we back it up with a robust SLA. And our experience is it's very compelling in terms of people that use the UI or the API really like it for its ease of use. And then finally, the automation, right? So again, obviously we don't want to sell on cost, but that is definitely a big part of what we are, Platform 9, in terms of cutting the cost out with the other proprietary vendors out there, in the market. But we are completely open standards based in terms of an API and automation and subscription billing, right? So again, these are some of the value propositions here that we want to bring about. Peter, any comments before we move to conclusions?
No, I think we're ready to jump to the conclusions here.
So a few conclusions from us to you all, right? And recommendations as technologists and technology architects and tech leaders. The first one is that a private cloud is still a very viable way to solve your application and infrastructure challenges. The complexities can all be taken away using a managed private cloud approach. And then we can prove this value to you in a simple proof of concept that typically takes 1 or 2 days to get done. And we could deliver everything using a SaaS managed plane, automate everything, so that in these days of COVID, we're able to have that value without having people on site or whatever have you, right? And then you can use a mix of VMs, bare metal, or containerized workloads, right? We focused on financial services, retail, and telco. Most of our customers here are using a mix of these technologies. At times, you have VNFs, network functions in telco that work as VMs, but you're starting to see more and more of those move to VCFs, right? Virtual container functions. And CNFs, containerized network functions, will support those. And again, we're able to keep the pod to admin or the VM to admin ratio extremely high, on par with the public cloud vendors. At the same time, we're part of open source. Majority of our employees are open source contributors. So we're glad to contribute and to make sure that the latest and greatest innovation that you want and need reaches you without having the lock-in. So Peter, anything to add to the conclusions before we wrap up and move to questions?
Honestly, I think you nailed it, right? It's complex, but it's a solvable problem. I think Platform 9 offers a vast number of solutions to getting you to that cloud-like feel in your local data center, in your private cloud, right? We can work with a mixture of locations. We can work with a mixture of hardware types. We can work with different storage backends, and we can put it all together in a self-service portal that end users can then leverage for Kubernetes-based workloads and or virtualized workloads. We can even isolate people, in groups from other groups if you want to do things like that. We can carve data centers up into different availability zones based on hardware types, right? Things along those lines. So, all right, let's jump to questions if we have a couple, and then we'll give away the Lego set.
Hi guys, this is Kamesh here. I'm following some questions here. The first one that I see is around the telco cloud upgrades. I think the question is when we have to certify the workloads and the infrastructure underneath has to be upgraded, and how do you handle that?
Sure.
Sure, I'll jump in, Vamsi. You can take it from there. So as we're looking at infrastructure in telcos or in remote locations and POPs and things like that, and the hardware needs to be upgraded, right? typically what we see is our telco customers are bringing in the new hardware. They're deploying it, right? They are then, managing the OS and deploying that on top of there with a certified OS. And then, you would leverage Platform 9 to set up an AZ and say, maybe this is a new CPU chipset or a new SRIOV group. And we'd set availability zones for that new hardware. So when they deploy workloads, that those workloads can deploy to an AZ that's got the appropriate hardware underneath them, so that that your application will run on top of the hardware that you select for that environment. Vamsi, any thoughts there?
No, I agree. And from a software perspective, there's a couple of things we've done for telco customers. We have customers that are running, up to 30 servers across hundreds of regions, right? That's a very common infrastructure problem. Or they're running, 5,000 servers in each and two regions, or really depending on your deployment go-to, right? And primarily, as you can understand, a lot of this is running on VMs or bare metal, with containers just starting to come up to the game. So again, some of the things we recommend are you model each of these sites as a region in OpenStack and tie them all using one common keystone. But also the fact is, with the mechanism, we have the ability to upgrade each region separately, and then we can also upgrade hosts separately as well. But this may not be the best alternative, but you can put in place things that do things in a controlled fashion. So again, really, we have the automation to do graceful upgrades that don't result in any downtime. We've done the same to Kubernetes as well. Peter and his teams have gone out and upgraded some of the largest clusters of Kubernetes running on bare metal or OpenStack without any downtime. And they do a lot of things such as making sure that the pods are starved of traffic, and then the upgrade process is sensitive to running concurrent or current running sessions, so on and so forth. But there are different ways to achieve that, and we'd be glad to share that. Now, the workload certification itself is something that, given that we are based on a version of OpenStack and then a version of Kubernetes, for two different products, as long as the workload is certified to run on Kubernetes, which is a Docker container typically, or in OpenStack, it's a VNF that is provided by a vendor and supported for a certain release of KVM or VMware, they should all work for us without any problems.
Hey, Vamsi, I think we've got time for one more question. Kamesh, do you have one more for us?
Yeah, there's one more question around OpenStack deployments and migration processes. How much effort would it take for us to migrate to Platform 9 and then upgrade? I guess it's a question of migrate and upgrade, and how is that handled?
Sure. Thanks, Kamesh. Great question. We've got a number of customers that have been moving from their OpenStack environments today to Platform 9. And one of the big challenges there is, how do we get our running VMs into a Platform 9 environment seamlessly and easily, right? And so, Platform 9 offers, as part of our implementation services, tooling that will help and will migrate VMs from one OpenStack to our OpenStack, right? Whether it's going to stop it and snapshot it, or if we do things at the Cinder and the storage backend level, we can take those VMs and migrate them to the Platform 9 environment with minimal downtime. So upgrading OpenStack is the sort of the second half of that question. Is the day two operations kind of focus, and Platform 9 really, that's something we do well, right? We've been, I think, in the OpenStack business since the Juno release, and we've been managing and upgrading all of our customers for a long period of time and helping them upgrade from, Juno to Kilo to et cetera, all the way through up to Rocky and Stein, where we're at today. And, it's a fully automated process. You work with our teams. You say, hey, I'd like to upgrade this dev environment first. You open up a support ticket with Platform 9. We say, great, what time do you want to do it? We schedule it, and we perform the upgrade for you. In 99% of the time, it results in zero downtime to your running VMs and just a control plane upgrade, and happens in the background.
Okay.
Pops?
We are just about out of time, folks, but we do have a winner for our draw, which I would like to announce now.